The sky above the battlefield was filled with streaks of light from weapons fire. Human ships and Vexry ships fought side by side against the Zalth Dominion, just as they had done for years. Captain Reeves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, shouting orders to his crew. Feeling the same trust he had felt for every Vexry pilot who fought alongside him. They had bled together, shared victories and defeats, and sworn an oath to protect each other until the war was won. The Zelth were pressing hard on the left flank, and Reeves called for the Vexry fleet to cover it. Their ships moved in quickly, their silver hulls glinting against the black of space. Reeves felt relief, certain that his allies would hold the line, but then, without warning, the comms filled with static, and a voice came through a human frigate captain screaming for help. It was cut off by an explosion. Reeves turned sharply to his sensor officer. Demanding an update, the officer's face went pale. The Vexori ships weren't firing on the Zalth anymore. They were turning their weapons on the human fleet, one by one. Friendly ships lit up as Vexry torpedoes ripped through their shields. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't crossfire. It was betrayal. The bridge fell into a stunned silence for a heartbeat before the chaos erupted. Reeves shouted for evasive maneuvers, but the Resolute took a direct hit to its starboard side. Throwing crew members to the floor, sparks rained down from the ceiling. Alarms blaring in every corner. Through the viewport, Reeves could see the Dauntless, a human carrier, taking heavy fire. That was his brother's ship. He grabbed the comm and tried to reach them. But all he heard was muffled shouting. Then the signal cut out. The carrier broke apart in a silent explosion. Debris scattering into the void around them. Human ships were being torn apart. The Vexry were targeting supply vessels first, ensuring the humans would be stranded even if they survived. Reeves' mind raced. The Zalths were still attacking. But now the humans had enemies on both sides. It was a trap, and they had walked right into it. The betrayal was too perfect to be an impulsive decision. It had been planned for months, maybe years. "Get us out of here," Reeves ordered, his voice raw with fury. The helmsman hesitated. Retreating meant leaving countless human ships behind. But staying meant certain death. With a grim nod, the Resolute swung around and fired its engines at full burn. Vexry ships pursued, firing relentlessly. But the human vessel managed to weave through the chaos. Using the wreckage of destroyed ships as cover, the comm channels were filled with desperate voices. Some begged for backup, others screamed in pain. And a few simply cursed the Vexry before static claimed them. Every voice that went silent burned itself into Reeves' memory. He knew these people. They weren't just soldiers. They were friends, family, people who had trusted him to lead them into battle and bring them home. And now they were dying because their so-called allies had turned on them. By the time the Resolute cleared the battlefield, Reeves' hands were shaking. The surviving human ships were scattered. Some limping away with hulls torn open, others barely functioning at all. No one spoke on the bridge. They all knew this wasn't just the loss of a battle. It was the breaking of a bond they had believed unshakable. In the days that followed, the truth spread among the survivors. The Vexry had made a secret agreement with the Zalth Dominion. In exchange for betraying humanity, they would be granted control over disputed territories and trade rights in the new order. To them, humans were expendable tools, used and discarded once their usefulness had ended. Reeves couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the Dauntless exploding. Heard the voices cut off mid-sentence. The grief turned to rage. He thought about every supply line destroyed, every human colony left vulnerable, every life lost because of the Vexry's greed. And as he stood alone in the observation deck, watching the stars drift by, he made himself a promise. This would not be forgotten. It would not be forgiven. The Vexry thought the humans would crumble, but they were wrong. They had awakened something dangerous, the will to fight, not for survival, But for retribution, the humans had lost the battle. They had lost ships, worlds, and people they loved. But in that loss, they had found a new purpose. One day, the Vexery would see human ships again. And on that day, humanity wouldn't be fighting. Beside them, they would be taking everything the Vexery had, and they would make sure the galaxy never forgot the cost of betrayal. The war was over for the Vexery, but not for the humans. The Vexery ships had returned to their shining cities, their markets full, their skies clear. They celebrated their so-called victory while the humans struggled to even count their dead. Earth was in ruins, its main cities reduced to twisted metal and dust. On the colony worlds, food was running out and medical supplies were almost gone. Families huddled in cold shelters, listening to the wind howl through broken streets. There were no fleets coming to help them, no allies sending aid. The Vexery didn't even bother to hide their contempt. In their news channels, they called humanity a broken race, unfit for survival. But they were wrong. Humanity wasn't broken, it was silent, and silence was dangerous. In the shadows of Mars's ruined shipyards, a small group of engineers worked day and night. They scavenged from wrecked ships, pulled power cells from destroyed stations, and repurposed anything they could find. They weren't building ships like the ones they'd lost. These new ships were faster, stealthier, and deadlier. They didn't want another drawn-out war. They wanted the kind of weapons that could hit the enemy before they even knew humans were there. On the icy moons of Jupiter, miners volunteered to work double shifts. They went deep into frozen tunnels to find rare ores, not for trade, but for war. Many of them had lost their families in the betrayal. Every swing of the drill was another promise. A promise to make the Vexery pay. The miners didn't ask. For credits, they didn't care about payment. Revenge was all the fuel they needed in underground labs on Titan. Scientists who once dreamed of peaceful exploration now studied weapons. They designed systems that could bypass Vexery shields and crush their defenses in seconds. One scientist, Dr. Harrow, had lost his daughter on a hospital ship that the Vexery destroyed. He had been gentle, patient, and kind once. Now he worked without rest, his hands shaking from exhaustion, whispering to himself that when the time came, they would have nothing left. Captain Reeves moved quietly between these secret projects. His ship, the Resolute, was patched up but far from new. Still, it served as a rallying point for those who refused to give up. He spoke to survivors, listened to their stories, and gave them something they had lost since the betrayal: purpose. Everywhere he went, he saw the same look in human eyes. They were done waiting for mercy that would never come. The plan forming in the shadows was not about defending territory or holding borders. It was about taking everything the Vexery relied on, every resource, every trade route, every piece of their wealth. The humans would bleed them dry without warning. And by the time the Vexery realized what was happening, it would already be too late, out in deep space. Far from any official patrols, the first of the new human warships was tested. It slipped through asteroid fields without leaving a trace on scanners. Its weapons could destroy a target before it even registered as hostile. The engineers stood in the control room, watching as their creation tore apart a derelict hulk in a single strike. They didn't cheer, they simply nodded. Knowing this was just the beginning, the Vexery still believed humanity was weak. Their leaders sat in crystal towers, signing trade deals with the Zalth Dominion, confident their power was untouchable. They didn't know that in hidden bases carved into asteroid cores, humans were preparing to take it all away. The Vexery called the humans finished. But in truth, the humans were only getting started. Every message that traveled through the underground network carried the same words: remember the betrayal. It wasn't just a reminder, it was a command. Pilots trained in stolen simulators, soldiers drilled in abandoned warehouses, And hackers broke into Vexry systems just to learn their weaknesses. From the smallest child to the oldest veteran, everyone had a role to play. And every role led to one goal. Payback. Reeves stood one night in the command center on Mars. Looking at the glowing map of the galaxy before him, the Vexry territories shone like jewels, connected by long trade routes full of ships and goods. He traced one of those routes with his finger and imagined it burning. Soon, he thought, very soon, the humans would strike, and when they did, the Vexry would feel the same helplessness they had inflicted. The Vexry's betrayal had been meant to end humanity instead. It had forged something the galaxy had never seen before, a united human will, burning with the cold fire of vengeance. It didn't matter how long it took. It didn't matter how much it cost. They would take back more than what they had lost. They would take everything. The months passed slowly, but for the humans, every day was used to prepare. They did not speak openly of revenge, but it was in every action they took. Every cargo crate lifted in a hidden dock. Every part stolen from a wreck. Every quiet handshake. Between trusted friends, it was a silent movement growing in the shadows. And no one outside their circle knew how deep it went. Miners in the asteroid belts worked like their lives depended on it. They dug through frozen rock and dust, pulling out rare ores that could be turned into weapons and ship armor. Some of them worked until their hands bled. They didn't complain. They remembered the faces of the people they had lost when the Vexry turned their guns on human ships. For them, the sound of the drills was not just work. It was the sound of building justice. Scientists unhidden. Stations created new technologies not seen in the last war. These weren't meant for defense. They were built for speed, for precision, for striking before an enemy even knew they were under attack. Dr. Harrow, the man who had lost his daughter on the destroyed hospital ship, had become one of the leaders of the project. He barely slept, spending every waking hour testing shield-piercing rounds and silent propulsion drives. People worried about his health, but he only said the same thing each time: "I'll rest when they have nothing left." In training camps scattered across the moons of Saturn, soldiers drilled without uniforms, without official ranks. They came from different walks of life: pilots, engineers, farmers, even former smugglers. But now they had one purpose. They practiced boarding actions, sabotage missions, and hit-and-run tactics. They didn't have the numbers to fight like the old days, so they would become a different kind of force, one that could strike anywhere and vanish without a trace. Captain Reeves traveled from base to base, never staying in one place too long. He spoke to the people quietly, telling them the same story. He reminded them of the day the Vexry betrayal came, how allies turned their weapons on those they had sworn to protect. And every time he saw the same fire light up in the eyes of those who listened, it wasn't the fire of rage alone, it was determination. They didn't just want revenge, wanted to make sure the Vexry could never do this to anyone else again. The plan was still forming, but the goal was clear. Wait until the Vexry truly believed humanity was finished. When the Vexry stopped paying attention, when their guard was down, the humans would strike. It would not be one big battle like before. It would be many small cuts, each one bleeding them a little more until the great empire was too weak to stand. A small group of human hackers, working from a hidden bunker on a dead moon, had already begun the first steps. They broke into Vexry merchant databases and copied their trade schedules. They mapped the routes of fuel shipments, food transports, and weapons deliveries. Every detail mattered: the number of guards, the speed of the ships, even the exact moment they passed through dangerous asteroid fields. This information would be worth more than any weapon, because it told them exactly where and when to hit. In one darkened hangar, the first of the new human warships was almost complete. It was smaller than the old battleships, but its black hull absorbed light and hid it from most scanners. Its engines made almost no noise. Its weapons locked on without warning when the engineers tested it against a drone target. The drone didn't even have time to activate its defenses before it was gone. The crew didn't cheer or celebrate. They just nodded in silence. Because this was the tool that would change everything all across the scattered human worlds, people began to notice small changes. A few more supply crates appearing in hidden storerooms. A few more ships with strange black plating seen only in secret docks. No one spoke of it openly, but the whispers grew. The humans were preparing for something big. And those who knew the truth kept their mouths shut because the element of surprise was their greatest weapon. Reeves knew the waiting would be. The hardest part, patience, did not come easily to a people who had suffered so much, but every time someone asked when the fight would begin, he gave the same answer. When they believe we're too weak to stand, we'll make them kneel. The Vexri had made the mistake of thinking humanity was like them. They believed humans needed treaties, fleets, and official armies to fight. They did not understand that humans could turn broken pieces into something stronger. They did not understand that humans could take pain and turn it into fuel. And when the first strike came, the Vexri would learn that the humans they had betrayed were not the same humans they had left to die. They had become something far more dangerous. The seeds of the reckoning had been planted, and soon they would grow into something the galaxy would never forget. The first strike came quietly. Without warning, there was no grand speech. No formal declaration. One moment the Vexri trade convoy was gliding through space. The next moment it was under attack. Captain Reeves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, his eyes fixed on the glowing blips moving across the scanner. 3 Vexri cargo ships, 2 light escorts, all carrying food, medical supplies, and energy cells. It was everything human colonies needed and everything the Vexri would not willingly give. The convoy was on a route far from major patrols, traveling through a dense asteroid field to save time. That made them vulnerable. Reeves had studied this route for weeks, memorizing every rock, every shadow, every blind spot in the scanners. The Resolute and 2 other human ships had been hiding in the asteroid field for hours. Engines off, lights dark, the crew waited in silence, their breath shallow, the air thick with tension. They knew this wasn't just another mission. This was the beginning. As the Vexri ships drifted into range, Reeves gave a single nod. The human ships came to life, engines roaring to full power. The sudden burst of movement caught the Vexri completely off guard. Before they could even broadcast a distress call, the Resolute's forward guns fired. Tearing through the lead escort's shields, the second human ship swooped in from above. Targeting the engines of the second escort, in seconds, both defenders were disabled. Drifting helplessly in space, the cargo ships tried to scatter, but the asteroid field boxed them in. Human pilots moved fast, positioning themselves to block every escape path. Reeves opened a channel to the Vexri convoy leader. "This is Captain Reeves of the human fleet," he said in a cold voice. "We're taking your cargo. All of it. If you resist, you won't leave this field." The Vexri captain on the other end stammered, trying to sound confident but failing. "This is piracy. You will be hunted." Reeves cut him off. "No. This is justice," he said, and closed the channel. Human boarding teams launched in small shuttles, attaching to the cargo ships and cutting their way inside. The Vexri crews didn't put up much of a fight. They were traders, not soldiers. Within minutes, the humans had control of all 3 cargo ships. The supplies were quickly transferred to hidden storage bays in the asteroid field. Medical crates were marked for colonies on the brink of collapse. Food was assigned to starving. Settlements and the energy cells would power hidden shipyards for months when the job was done. Reeves didn't order the destruction of the captured ships. Instead, he had the Vexri crews left alive but stripped of all navigation data. They would drift back to their empire with nothing but the memory of how easily they were taken. It was a message, and it would spread fast. Humanity wasn't gone. Humanity was out here, watching and striking when it pleased. Back on the Resolute, the crew felt something they hadn't felt in a long time. Victory, it wasn't the kind of victory where banners flew and crowds cheered. It was quieter, but deeper. They had taken from the very people who had left them to die. And now those resources would save human lives. Word of the attack spread through the hidden network like fire, in mining camps, in underground labs, in secret docks. People smiled for the first time in months. It wasn't just about the supplies, it was proof. Proof that the Vexari weren't untouchable. Proof that humanity could hit back. The Vexari response was predictable. Their news broadcasts called the attack a crime. They labeled Reeves and his crew as terrorists and offered huge bounties for their capture, but behind closed doors, their leaders were unsettled. The convoy route had been considered safe, the escorts more than enough. Now they realized that the humans had the skill and courage to strike deep into their territory. Without warning, Reeves didn't care what names they called him. All that mattered was that the plan had worked. The first strike was complete, and the next would be bigger. Before the human fleet jumped away, Reeves stood on the bridge, looking out at the drifting Vexari ships. He knew this was only the start. Every mission from here on would weaken the Vexari. A little more, every shipment stolen, every route disrupted. Every credit taken from their pockets would bring them closer to the moment when the Vexari would be forced to face what they had done. The crew didn't celebrate openly, but there was a spark in their eyes now. They had been broken once, but now they were becoming something else, something the Vexari couldn't understand. They weren't fighting for borders or politics anymore. They were fighting for survival, for revenge, and for the promise that no one would ever betray humanity again without paying the price. And somewhere deep inside the asteroid field, hidden from every Vexari scanner, the stolen supplies were already on their way to the people who needed them most. For those people, the humans out there in the black were no longer just survivors. They were saviors, and for the Vexari, they had become a shadow in the dark, a shadow that would keep growing until it swallowed them whole. The Vexari leadership thought the humans would only strike at ships and supplies. They were wrong. The humans wanted more than stolen cargo. They wanted to tear the Vexari apart from the inside. And to do that, they had to plant doubt, suspicion, and fear in the hearts of the Vexari people. The plan began with whispers. Hidden transmitters in deep space sent out short, encrypted messages in the Vexari language. They were disguised as civilian broadcasts, news reports, even music transmissions. But in between the harmless content, there were short sentences that made listeners stop and think. Your leaders betrayed their allies, one voice would say. They left millions to die so they could keep their own cities safe. Another message would slip in. It wasn't enough to make the Vexari rise up, not yet. But it was enough to make them start asking questions. Reeves knew they couldn't just tell the Vexari what had happened. They had to show them. Hackers in the human network broke into Vexari military archives and found recordings from the day of betrayal, footage of Vexari ships turning their weapons on human allies, audio of commanders giving the kill orders, and worst of all, secret agreements signed with the Zalth Dominion before the battle even began. Those files were leaked to Vexari civilian networks, spreading like wildfire. The government tried to block them, but once something is out in the galaxy, it never truly disappears on one Vexari trade world. A small group of dock workers began refusing to load military shipments. They told their supervisors they wouldn't support a government that killed former allies. They were arrested within hours, but their story was broadcast by the human underground, making them symbols of resistance. In another city, a young Vexari journalist started asking dangerous questions. Why had the humans been abandoned? Why had the government lied about the events of the battle? She was threatened, her news license revoked. But she continued to speak out using pirate radio channels. Reeves made sure her voice reached every corner of the Empire. She became known as the Silver Voice, and every time she spoke, more Vexori began to wonder if their leaders were hiding more than just one betrayal. The humans also began targeting the loyalty of the Vexori military itself. Through secret contacts, they found disillusioned officers, men and women, who had been ordered to fire on humans but had hated themselves for it ever since. Some of these officers provided valuable intelligence, convoy routes, patrol schedules, codes for shield access. One even gave the humans the exact coordinates of a hidden weapons depot when the depot exploded in a sudden human raid. The Vexori government told the public it was an accident, but the soldiers stationed there knew better, and some began wondering if they were serving the wrong cause. Every action the humans took was carefully planned to make it look like the Vexori leaders were losing control. A military base would suffer a security breach. A trade route would be mysteriously delayed. Supplies meant for the government would vanish and reappear in poor neighborhoods. The people didn't know how it was happening, but they knew someone was out there helping them, and it wasn't their own leaders. Reeves understood something important. A fleet could be rebuilt, a planet could be retaken. But once a people lost faith in their leaders, that was almost impossible to repair. The betrayal that had united humanity was now being turned into a weapon to divide the Vexori. The human underground broadcast messages filled with both truth and challenge. They didn't speak like diplomats. They spoke like survivors. Your leaders betrayed us once. One message said, they will betray you too, for many Vexori civilians. It was the first time they had ever considered the possibility that their shining empire was built on lies. Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its shadow war. They struck small targets, never staying long enough to be caught. Every time they won, the news would reach the Vexori public before the government could spin it. It became harder and harder for the leaders to hide the fact that humans were outmaneuvering them. One night, Reeves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, listening to intercepted Vexori communications. An angry governor shouted at a military officer, blaming him for the loss of another shipment. The officer shouted back, accusing the government of lying about the strength of the human fleet. The argument ended with both sides cutting the channel. Reeves smiled. The cracks were spreading. The humans were no longer just an enemy force in the shadows. They were an idea that the Vexori's time at the top of the galaxy was ending. And the more the Vexori fought to keep control, the more their own people started slipping away from them. Reeves knew it wouldn't happen overnight, but every rumor, every broadcast, every act of quiet rebellion was a step toward the real victory. The humans wouldn't just defeat the Vexori fleet. They would make sure the Vexori's own people no longer believed in their empire at all. When that happened, taking everything they had would be the easiest part of all. The Vexori capital was a shining city, built high on towering spires that reached toward the stars. It was the heart of their empire, a place of wealth, power, and endless trade. At the center stood the Grand Exchange, the largest marketplace in the galaxy. Every important deal, every transfer of wealth, passed through its great halls. If you wanted to know the true power of the Vexori, you looked at the exchange. Captain Reeves and his team had planned their boldest move yet, not to attack a military base or a fleet, but to strike at the very soul of the Vexori power. The Grand Exchange held vaults filled with credits, resources, and priceless artifacts. If the humans could destroy the wealth and trust stored there, the empire would tremble. The night before the raid, human strike teams gathered in hidden tunnels beneath the city. They were a mix of soldiers, hackers, and engineers, all trained. For this one moment, the air was thick with tension. Everyone knew the risks if they were caught. It would mean death or worse, but they also knew the reward. This was their chance to show the Vexery that betrayal had consequences. Under the cover of darkness, the teams moved swiftly, silent grappling hooks attached to service ducts, and they climbed into the exchange's lower levels, the security. Systems were tight, more advanced than any the humans had faced before. But the hackers had found weaknesses. They disabled cameras and opened hidden doors. The teams moved like ghosts through corridors, avoiding patrols and laser sensors. When they reached the vaults, the engineers got to work. They used advanced tools to bypass locks and security grids. Inside, piles of credits and precious materials glimmered under soft lights. The humans worked quickly, transferring data drives and energy cores into special containers. One team rigged explosives designed to destroy the vaults without damaging the entire building. Suddenly, an alarm blared. Someone had triggered a hidden sensor. Reeves ordered the teams to speed up. The Vexery guards were already mobilizing. Their footsteps echoing down the halls, smoke grenades filled the corridors. Hiding the humans' retreat, they fought with precision and calm, disabling guards without killing whenever possible. This wasn't just about destruction. It was a message back outside as the teams escaped through maintenance tunnels. The explosives detonated. The vaults collapsed in a controlled explosion. The floor shook and alarms rang through the city. The Grand Exchange went dark, its proud towers losing their glow for the Vexery citizens. It was a shock. The heart of their wealth had been struck. And badly, the news spread quickly. Markets shuttered their doors. Trade ships stayed in port. Fear rippled through the Vexery economy. Leaders scrambled to reassure their people. But the damage was done. Investors pulled back. And once loyal merchants began questioning the safety of their fortunes. The Vexery government called the raid a terrorist act, blaming the humans for economic chaos, but the people whispered a different story. Many had heard the secret broadcasts, seen the leaked files, and now understood the humans' anger. For the first time, some Vexery started doubting their leaders openly. They could not protect the Grand Exchange. Could they protect anything? Reeves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching news feeds from the Vexery capital. He knew the strike would have far-reaching effects. The attack had not only stolen wealth, it had shaken the confidence of the Vexery people in their empire. And confidence was the foundation of any power. The humans did not celebrate loudly. But quietly, in hidden bases across the galaxy, there was hope. Hope that the tide was turning. That betrayal would not go unpunished. That the future belonged to those who had the courage to fight back. This raid was a warning the Vexery could no longer hide behind their strength and influence. The humans were coming for everything, and the Grand Exchange was only the beginning. The Vexery had been shaken before, but the attack on the Grand Exchange broke something deep inside their empire. Trade slowed to a crawl, markets were unstable, and merchants were demanding protection the government could not promise. Every convoy needed more guards, and every guard cost more credits. The Empire's pride was cracking, and the cracks were spreading fast. It didn't take long for the Vexery leadership to realize they could not win this war in the shadows every time. They strengthened one defense. The humans struck somewhere else. Every time they tried to protect their wealth, another shipment disappeared, and all the while, the whispers among their own people grew louder. Questions about the betrayal, about the lies, about whether the humans were truly the villains. They had been told at last, under the pressure of failing trade and growing unrest. The Vexery sent out a message to the humans. It was short, formal, and dripping with desperation. They requested a meeting. They said they were ready to discuss peace. The meeting was set to take place on neutral ground, a massive space station that floated between both territories. Captain Reeves arrived with a small escort, his face hard and unreadable. He knew the Vexery had not come out of kindness. They were here because they were afraid, and fear could be used. Across the table sat 3 high-ranking Vexery diplomats. Dressed in their finest silks and gold, they bowed stiffly, their eyes full of unease. One of them began with polite words about ending the cycle of violence and restoring trust. Reeves didn't smile, didn't nod. He simply waited. Until they were done, then leaned forward. "You came here because you're losing," he said plainly. The Vexery shifted uncomfortably. "You came here because your people are starting to wonder if they're on the wrong side of history." They tried to speak of mutual forgiveness, of moving past the war, but Reeves cut them off again. "There is no moving past what you did," he said, his voice low but firm. "You betrayed us in the middle of a battle. You left our people to die so you could sign deals with the Dominion. And now you want to talk about peace because we've taken away your comfort." The Vexery lead diplomat stiffened. "What exactly do you want then?" he asked, his tone almost a challenge. Reeves leaned back and listed it out clearly. "We will take your outer colonies. We will take control of your major trade routes. We will take every shipment of food, medicine, and resources we need to rebuild. And we will keep taking until every debt is paid in full." The room went silent. The Vexery exchanged glances, shocked, angry, but also uncertain. One of them tried to argue that such demands were impossible. Reeves didn't raise his voice. But his words cut sharp. "You thought it was possible to turn your weapons on us after we fought beside you. You thought it was possible to watch us burn. Now you will learn what's possible when we decide to take everything you value." The diplomats asked for time to review the terms. Reeves shook his head. "You don't have time. Every day you delay, another one of your convoys disappears. Another one of your cities goes dark." When the meeting ended, Reeves walked out first. Leaving the Vexery sitting in silence, he knew they would have no choice. Their empire was bleeding, and only the humans could decide when to stop the flow. Back aboard the Resolute, Reeves spoke to his crew. "The Vexery think they can buy their way out of what they've done." He said, "They can't. They will pay until they understand that betrayal has a price no one can afford." In the days that followed, the Vexery tried sending partial payments, a shipment of fuel here, some credits there. Reeves refused them. It wasn't enough. The raids continued, targeting anything the Vexery still considered vital. Spaceports went dark, banking hubs failed, and entire sectors were cut off from supplies. The galaxy watched in stunned silence. An empire that had once seemed unshakable was bending under the weight of its own greed and fear. And everywhere the humans struck, the same message echoed. This was not revenge anymore. This was justice. The Vexery could no longer pretend to be in control. Their leaders were trapped between giving in to human demands or facing total collapse. And Captain Reeves knew they were getting closer to the moment when they would finally break, when they would surrender everything. The war between humans and the Vexery did not end with one final battle. It ended slowly, piece by piece, until the Vexery had nothing left to give. Every week, another one of their colonies fell under human control. Every month, another trade route was taken and guarded by human ships. Their empire, once vast and untouchable, was now a shadow of what it had been. The Vexery leaders tried to keep up appearances. They stood before cameras, making speeches about unity and recovery. But their people no longer believed them. Too many had seen the truth. Too many had heard the human broadcasts and read the leaked files. They knew their leaders had betrayed the humans, and in doing so, had doomed their own empire. By the time the Vexery Council finally surrendered completely, there was little left to negotiate. Captain Reeves and the Human Council dictated every term. Entire star systems were handed over to human governance. Massive storehouses of food, medicine, and raw materials were transferred to human colonies. Even the Vexery fleet was dismantled. its ships either scrapped or absorbed into the growing human navy. Reeves stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching as the last Vexery warship was towed into a human-controlled dock. It was more than a victory. It was the end of the fear that had hung over humanity since the day of betrayal. The humans had not just survived, they had taken everything the Vexery thought made them powerful. The galaxy watched closely. Other alien nations, once unsure if humanity could recover, now saw them as a force to be reckoned with. They had risen from ruin and turned their pain into strength. They had done what no one thought possible. Defeated an empire not through sheer numbers, but through relentless will for the Vexery. Life had changed forever. Their great cities still stood, but now they flew human banners. Their proud markets traded under human law, and their former rulers lived under constant watch, stripped of their authority to the average Vexery citizen. It was a strange new world. Some resented it. But many quietly admitted they were better off without the old leaders who had dragged them into treachery. On Earth, the news of final victory brought celebration. In the colonies, supplies began arriving in huge shipments. Children who had gone hungry for years finally had enough to eat. Hospitals that had once been forced to choose which patients to save now had the resources to save them all. The scars of betrayal were still there. But they were healing. Reeves walked through the restored streets of a human colony on Mars. He passed families laughing together, workers rebuilding homes, and children chasing each other under the warm glow of restored lights. This was what it had all been for, not just revenge, but a future where no human would have to live in fear of being abandoned again when he returned to the Resolute. Reeves received a message from an old miner on the asteroid belt. It was simple and short. "We did it," Reeves smiled. Because those words carried the weight of years of struggle, sacrifice, and loss. The humans did not erase the memory of what had happened. They taught it in schools across human space. The story of the betrayal and the long fight for justice was told in full. Children learned not only about the battles, but about the importance of unity, resilience, and never trusting blindly. It became a reminder that strength was not just in ships or weapons, but in the will to stand together when everything seemed lost. The Vexery's name, once spoken with respect and fear, was now a cautionary tale. They were the empire that thought betrayal was clever politics, and they paid the price until nothing remained. One evening, Reeves stood alone on the observation deck. Looking out at the stars, the war was over. But he knew the galaxy was never truly safe. There would always be threats, always new dangers. But now, humanity had proven something important. They were not a race to be pitied or underestimated. They were a race that, when wronged, would rise and take everything from those who tried to break them. The betrayal that was meant to destroy them had instead built the strongest version of humanity the galaxy had ever seen. And as Reeves watched the human fleets patrolling their new territories, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: that Vexery and the galaxy would never forget the cost of turning against the humans.